So I really like building cutting boards. It's a straightforward process and you can make totally different boards by just changing the pattern or the shape of it. I've made a few right here that you can see, and you can find those videos as well if you want to see how I made those. Recently I was inspired by John Boos, who makes cutting boards, and I really like some of his that just seem to be a little thicker and a little larger than normal. So when you set them out in your kitchen, they are more of a statement piece, but not taking away from other things with too wild of a pattern. So I wanted something for my kitchen, and I built this here. I also wanted to make a round cutting board, which is something that I've never done before and thought it might be a little challenging. So let me walk you through the process of what I did. I started off by dimensioning some walnut that I had lying around. This wood was part of a batch that I drove over 2 hours for because it was $1 a pound for walnut. There's a place in Oregon that I just really like to go to. They always have a good selection of walnut, and I can always find a pretty good deal. Plus it worked out well that I stocked up because with coronavirus, I'm not out shopping for wood right now. I'm building an end-grain cutting board, so I'm making one side the precise size that I want, 1.5 inches. The other side I let run about 1/4 inch long, so that after the glue up I can sand it to the final dimension of 1.5 inches. That will give the board a square pattern on the top. I use Titebond 3 because it's food safe, waterproof, and I've had good results with it. I got these pipe clamps for Christmas, and this is the first chance I've had to use them. They are a game changer. I can apply even pressure on the top and bottom, and it's easy to keep the board flat during glue up. My main problem in the past was that the side laying on the parchment paper didn't dry well. These elevate it off the paper so that it's not a problem. You can use many types of clamps, so if these are not in your budget, it's okay. I will say though that these make things a lot easier. Oh, don't you hate it when your project is 18 inches and you have a 12-inch planer? I know, first world problems, right? Luckily, I got a new tool in the shop. I've been looking for about a year now when a friend of mine tipped me off to this one, so I bought it on the spot. It's a Performex 25-inch drum sander, so it can take wood up to 25 inches wide. I can use it for stock removal or a more finer sanding, depending on the grit I'm using. I also like that it can handle end grain, unlike my planer. A lot of people think you need to spend a lot of money to get nice tools. This was a used, broken machine. Cost me $500. It wasn't in great shape. The belt was held together with duct tape. The feed motor didn't work, and there was water damage. It had obviously sat in a barn for many years and not been used. However, the Performex brand is American made, so parts are readily available. The main motor seemed to be working well, so I figured it was worth the money and the risk. I cleaned it up and put on a new feed roller using an owner's manual that I downloaded online. The instructions were straightforward and easy enough to follow. It's still not tracking perfectly and seems to pull one direction. The feed motor was a different story. I couldn't find the exact model, and similar ones were around $200 that I just didn't want to spend. So in the end, my husband took it apart, found out the magnets had come off the housing. He epoxied them back in, rebuilt the motor, and it works great now. There are still some missing parts, and it's fairly new to me. I'm working on dialing it in, and there's still some things that I'm just not used to. So it'll take me a while. However, since it was working, I just had to try it out and use it on this project. I was planning to make a thicker cutting board, but didn't have quite enough material. So rather than having a really small circle, I cut it at just under 1 3/4 inches. Everything's a trade-off here. And here's everything all lined up. I flipped every other board to give it a checkered pattern. I cleaned up the edges, getting everything prepped for gluing. And finally gluing everything up. One of the main challenges I've had with glue ups is shifting of the pieces as I clamp. Unfortunately, a couple of these pieces shifted slightly, so it doesn't line up perfectly. I was hoping the new clamps would help, but it didn't. I noticed it always shifts with the more recent glue, so I may try letting the glue get tacky before I tighten it up next time. I've also heard of a salt trick, but I'm a little nervous in adding something to the glue. If you found a fix for this, please comment below as it can benefit all of us. Afterwards, I used a chisel to remove the dried glue just to give it a flat surface for running through the sander. I used the drum sander to get both sides smooth and get the board to its final thickness of 1 1/2 inches. One of the unique things about this board is that it will be round. In order to do this, I needed a round template. I used some 1-inch plywood I had, found the middle, and cut a hole for my circle jig. If you want a video on how I created the circle jig, please comment below as I'm happy to share that. What you don't see is my tire came off my bandsaw, creating some wobbly cuts. Luckily, it was close enough and I cleaned it up with sandpaper. I put some tape down so I can hold the template on with CA glue and accelerator, but not ruin my wood pieces. The nice thing about using accelerator is how quickly it works. Now that I got my bandsaw back on the wheel, I cut the walnut as close to the template as I can get without cutting into the plywood. Just getting a rough cut before moving to the router. It's a good thing I wasn't able to make a 2-inch cutting board because I realize I only have a 1-inch flush trim bit. I thought I'd give it a shot to see if I could make it work. It kinda did, but left a lip at the bottom, so I had to start thinking outside the box. I decided to use a chamfer bit to knock the bottom off. This would also give it a nice look and give it an area to put your fingers under if you want to lift it up. Because my edge was not smooth, I'll have to go back and do the chamfer bit again. Not ideal, but it lets me use the tools that I already have without buying something new. And switching back to the flush trim bit, hoping to have more success this time. tightening everything up, and we're good to go. It's nice to have that router bit protected as I run the wood through, just in case anything goes wrong. The flush trim bit worked great, so I moved on to the second pass of the chamfer bit, just to clean it up. And here's the final edge. At this point, I removed the template, and thanks to the tape, I can save it and use it another time. I knocked off the edge with a 1/8 inch roundover bit, just to remove the harsh edge. Now to the sanding. I had some pretty aggressive burn marks due to my inexperience with my belt sander. I went through basic grit progression on all sides up to 150 grit. Then I used some water to raise the grain and let it dry. Once dried, I continued sanding up to 400 grit. Can you see the scraps from my walnut implosion that I decided to glue up? It's right there in the background. I made my own wood butter that is all natural and petroleum free. I'm going to try it out for a bit, and if it works well, I'll definitely share the recipe with you. The first time you use it and hear the knife cutting into the wood, it's a bit painful. But it works great, and I'm really happy with how it looks. If you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen me starting this over a week ago. If not, check the link below so you can keep up to date on my most recent projects. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future builds.